Disgraced film producer Harvey Weinstein is reportedly headed to a rehab center in Arizona. According to TMZ, Weinstein took off in a private jet Wednesday evening bound for Wickenburg, Arizona. No word on where he will be receiving treatment, but the nearby Meadows Rehab Center is equipped to deal with sex addiction issues. While previous reports indicated that the 65-year-old was going to leave the country for treatment, TMZ says the plans were scrapped as his team wanted him to receive therapy within the country. As for his state of mind, Weinstein was caught by paparazzi outside his daughter's house on Wednesday afternoon, and he says he's not doing okay. This comes as a growing number of actresses are coming forward with accusations of sexual harassment and assault. Weinstein took a jab at those women, telling photographers, "And you know what? I've always been loyal to you guys," adding, "I've always been the good guy."
First, Harvey Weinstein was fired by his own company after the New York Times reported sexual harassment allegations against him over 3 decades, which he denies. Then came Ronan Farrow's devastating New Yorker article in which 3 women on the record say the movie mogul raped them, which, again, he denies. Now, more accusers are emerging just about every day, not just actresses, but journalists like Lauren Sivan.
And that's where he cornered me in this vestibule and leaned in and tried to kiss me, which I immediately rebuffed and said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." And he immediately exposed himself and, began pleasuring himself. And I just stood there dumbfounded.
Weinstein is a major Democratic donor, and it took nearly 6 days for Barack Obama to say he and Michelle were disgusted and, quote, "Any man who demeans and degrades women in such fashion needs to be condemned and held accountable regardless of wealth or status." And for Hillary Clinton to say she was shocked and appalled by Harvey Weinstein.
It's good Clinton broke her silence. Of course, it is too bad she was one of the last to do so.
I just don't understand why the day this came out, she wasn't on Twitter condemning it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
The fact that the Clintons and the Obamas embraced him, I think, is a dark mark on their record.
The former First Lady finally spoke about it publicly on CNN.
What was your reaction when you heard the news about Harvey Weinstein?
I was just sick. I was shocked. I was appalled. It was something that was just intolerable in every way.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Guy Benson, political editor of townhall.com. Jessica Tarloff, senior director at Bustle, both are Fox News contributors, and Erin McPike, White House correspondent for Independent Journal Review. Fareed Zakaria didn't ask Hillary Clinton the obvious question, what took you so long?
He didn't. He did ask her about giving back some of the money that she'd taken from Weinstein, and she said she's going to bundle that into her yearly charitable giving. It's unclear where that would go or if it's on top of her normal 10% as she described. I do think that there's a question for Democrats more broadly. Is the party going to divest from this tainted money from Harvey Weinstein?
Do you feel like the media are pressing that question or kind of going easy on the DNC?
Well, so the DNC put out this ridiculous charade of a policy, which was they're going to give away 10% of it to groups devoted to electing Democrats, which is basically the DNC. And they got some positive headlines for it saying, oh, they're giving away the money. If the media is that easily fooled, then shame on them. There should be more pressure on that front.
Jessica, I'm glad that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are now speaking out against Harvey Weinstein, but it's hard to avoid the conclusion they were being uber cautious because Weinstein is not just a big-time Democratic donor, he threw fundraisers for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the actual cash amount that came directly from Harvey Weinstein was quite minimal comparatively, but he certainly has been a great friend of the Democratic Party and liberal causes. I mean, even his first ridiculous letter said, "I'm going to focus my attention now on the NRA," like as if, we want him with us in any way whatsoever. To the larger point here, I think that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were late to the game, and I think that the issue is not what we're going to do with the money, but what we're going to do actually with the ideology, because I believe strongly in the values of the Democratic Party being champions of women. I believe our policies are better for women across the board. And if we're not the first to the fire on issues like this, I think that it's hard for us to stand up there and say that.
Now, Republicans are sometimes reluctant when a conservative gets into this type of trouble, but what Harvey Weinstein did, and of course he was kicked out of the Academy Awards yesterday, should cut across partisan lines, right?
Yeah, it absolutely should. No, I don't think 6 days is all that long, but I do know that people who tend to defend Clinton on television, on Twitter, in the press, were waiting for a response and were kind of frustrated that the Clinton team wasn't giving them one on
There were
time.
stories about when is Hillary going to speak about this. If it had been some big Republican donor, it would have taken 6 minutes, 6 hours at the most.
Well, look, that's true, but Hillary Clinton is no longer running for president, and people do want her to go away, and President Obama is no longer president, so, you know.
But she is on a book tour. All right, so and how does NBC let Ronan Farrow, who got a number of women to go on the record, 3 of them accusing Harvey Weinstein of rape, which, again, he denies anything non-consensual. Farrow's a special correspondent with NBC, former MSNBC host. How do you let him walk away with that scoop?
So, as a disclosure, I'm friends with Ronan, and I thought that he gathered, based on just what we know publicly, he gathered a lot of factual, reportable information on this story over many months. 8 women on the record. The pushback he got internally from NBC is shocking, and we've seen the dribs and drabs coming out from within the building. People angry at NBC, at their own network, for basically giving up this scoop and chasing him off to the New Yorker, which has very high editorial standards, and they ran the piece. So I think this looks terrible for NBC News, and I do want to very quickly give some credit to Rachel Maddow, which I don't often do. You played the clip at the top of the show. She asked him and pressed him on that issue on an NBC-owned network.
Yes.
Good for her.
It was the elephant in the room, and she didn't let it go. I just want to play for you, Jessica, one piece of audio tape. This is something that Ronan Farrow had months ago, because there's some dispute about how many of the women did he have on the record at the time. He was still doing the story for NBC. So this is Ambra Badalana Gutierrez, a model who 2 years ago had said that she was groped by Harvey Weinstein the day before. She wore a wire in a New York police sting. Let's listen.
Please come in now, and 1 minute, and if you want to leave, when the guy comes with my jacket, you can go.
Yesterday you touched my breast.
Oh, please, I'm sorry, just come on, I'm used to that. Come on.
Are you used to that?
Yes, come in.
No, but I'm not used to that.
I won't do it again. Come on, sit here. Sit here for a minute, please.
No, I don't want to.
He admits the groping on the tape. How is that by itself not a story for NBC?
I don't know, and I don't know what Sigh Vance was thinking either when he declined to prosecute.
He's the Manhattan District Attorney.
District Attorney, yeah. But adding on to what Guy was talking about, NBC also got scooped on the Access Hollywood tape because they waited on this with the Trump tape. Right. So clearly there are some problems there at the top at NBC about their decision, you know, to not go forward with these huge stories and stories that the American people need to be hearing about, whether it's the President of the United States of America or it's someone that's running Hollywood.
So I've worked at both NBC and CNN, both of their news departments. The Access Hollywood tape, you know, I don't know that we can say that the actual news department knew of the Access Hollywood tape. I think that's up for debate. But look, networks kill stories all of the time. It is frustrating at every network. CNN does not have a leg to stand on to go after NBC for not running that story. And my suspicion is that it had a lot more to do with the fact that they thought, oh, Ronan Farrow grew up in Hollywood and he is young, and they probably wanted to make him a star but didn't necessarily believe in his journalistic chops. There's a lot of that could have been going on.
Why do you say
why
CNN?
didn't know that a show, though? And I mean, Ronan Farrow said that he had to go out and spend his own money to do some of this bidding for a crew because NBC wouldn't support him. Don't hire him in the first place if you don't think he has the chops to do it.
Just briefly, why do you say CNN doesn't have a leg to stand on?
Because I know they kill stories. I've seen it happen.
All right. We'll have to come back to that sometime. In fairness, NBC News President Noah Oppenheim told his staff, and the network put this out, that it was offensive that anyone would think NBC was covering up for a powerful person, and that, in his view, Ronan Farrow's story wasn't ready for prime time at the time he was dealing with NBC. But, of course, weeks later, this incredibly well-documented piece shows up in The New Yorker. All right, so do you think that too many journalists have perpetuated the myth of Harvey Weinstein, the mighty movie mogul, the guy who makes stars, the guy who wins Oscars, while basically looking away from conduct that we're hearing more and more was an open secret in New York and Hollywood? Yeah,
and, you know, one element of this story that I've been fascinated by is the late-night comedians who jumped all over stories about, oh, I don't know, people at our network who got into trouble along these lines and
who speak out against Trump regularly.
And Trump regularly. So, look, this is obviously harassment a problem not just in Hollywood but elsewhere. It's the gusto and the immediacy with which some of these people went after in the media and in comedy after some targets but not others. And some of the excuses now from Jimmy Kimmel and Seth Meyers explaining why they pulled their punches, to me, do not hold water at all. And I think there's some human nature here. Going after friends and going after people who are powerful in your orbit is difficult. That's the truth to power.
And
that's
by the
tough.
way, NBC has business relationships with NBC Universal Pictures and Bravo with Weinstein's companies and that sort of thing. Now, it is hard, though, to nail down and document these kinds of things where it's often two people in a room. And I'm not being critical in any way of the women, and particularly those who are young and aspiring actresses, for not speaking out. But you have to have people who are willing to go on the record before you can report these kind of explosive charges.
Right. That's why everyone on both sides of the aisle should be praising these women who did find the courage to do that. And yes, it took some of them a few years to make sure that they had established their careers and they had the legs to stand on to do it. But the audio came out of Courtney Love back in 2005 saying, don't work for Harvey Weinstein. This was going to happen to you. And CAA banned her, lifetime ban. So when people blame the women, and I have been on other panels about this, where my opponent has come out and said, these women knew, Meryl Streep knew, Jane Fonda admitted she knew a year ago. Don't you dare talk about those women and put them down for what they did when you see what happened to a Courtney Love.
And this sets up my question to you, which is New York Times columnist Jim Rutenberg wrote about this, that there's a network of very aggressive public relations people and lawyers who guard the secrets of those who they work for, and that they keep this stuff out of public view, and then only major news organization, New York Times, New Yorker, which have lawyers and factors, can take this on.
Well, that's right. And look, a lot of very wealthy entities or people, when they foresee a crisis happening, will bring on a public relations firm so that they can fend off this sort of thing, which obviously we know happened with Harvey Weinstein before he was trying to stop the New York Times story.
And by the way, Harvey Weinstein on the cover of Time magazine looking like a villain, which is pretty much how he's been cast. Producer, predator, pariah.